This weekend, Amy Klobuchar, senator, launched as the latest Democratic nominee for the presidency, making the primary field even that much more crowded. And we're going to, tomorrow, we're gonna have an expert on from the Center for Public Integrity to break down some of her donors, prior fundraising and things like that. We'll talk about her platform, everything. But in the days leading up to her announcement, there was some incredibly interesting original reporting from the Huffington Post having to do with her history of staffing issues. And we're now joined on the show by one of the two reporters doing that work. This is Amanda Terkel, Washington bureau chief for the Huffington Post. Amanda, welcome to the Damage Report.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you here. And so you spoke with a number of members of the senator's staff, and apparently there has been some issues with the way that she has previously treated them. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So we talked to quite a few staffers who have worked for Amy Klobuchar over the years, and they say that she has mistreated them and in some ways is an abusive boss. And that's not to say that there's, what you would think of as like sexual harassment or anything like that, but that she is, she goes beyond the typical ways that a boss is supposed to treat an employee. She asks her staff to come to her house and do personal errands for her, things like washing the dishes or picking up dry cleaning. And those things are actually against the rules if you are a senator or a member of Congress. And just little things like she's constantly berating her staff. It's not uncommon for staffers to wake up in the middle of the night and see an email saying that you're the worst person who's ever worked for me. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And that it just creates this feeling where they're constantly on edge and there's a lot of anxiety. And, these are not people who have never worked for a woman in office, who have never worked for other Hill offices. They say that her behavior is unusual amongst this toxic environment on the Hill, which, again, is not necessarily great a lot of times. And she's not alone in her behavior, but she has risen above some of the other bosses.
And as one example, perhaps, of that culture, the sort of knowledge of the staff of the way that she typically has been, there was like an 8-page advisory memo on how to deal with her in certain ways, like advice for new staffers?
Right. So this was during her first campaign in 2006 when she was running for Senate. She was then Hennepin County Attorney back in Minneapolis. And a lot of times you will have, this is really common when you're a campaign and you make a memo for staffers about how to deal with the candidate or with the politician. Things like make sure they always have a Diet Coke in their room. They like the room to be a little cooler when they arrive. Just standard things like that for staffing someone. Make sure she has her purse. Just really, really normal things. But this memo was unusual, according to people we spoke to, because there are a couple things in it. One was that it said in your free time when you're at her home or waiting for her, you should pick up her laundry, organize her room, and just make her bedroom look tidy. That is not common. These people aren't maids. They're professional political staffers. And there was another warning saying that if she's angry, just let her vent. This won't be the first time that you see her or hear her do this, and basically don't get in her way, which gives a hint at how she can have a temper that maybe gets out of hand at times.
So you also had a follow-on story a couple of days later talking about former Minority Leader Harry Reid having a talk with her about these rumors were going around. And so I'm curious about that. And also, based on your conversations with the staffers, is there evidence that this problem that she has worked to fix this problem in more recent days?
So Harry Reid in 2015, we were told by multiple sources, pulled her aside and had a private conversation with her to talk about the way she treats her staff and basically asking her not to do it anymore. And when it rises up to the level of the head of the Democratic caucus, that there is a bit of a problem there. And in terms of whether it's gone away, this goes back to her days as Hennepin County Attorney. We talked about that memo when she ran for Senate in 2006. But in 2002, there were reports that the local union had asked the higher union at the state or national level not to endorse her run because of the way she treated her staff. So this goes back a long time. And the staffers we talked to have worked for her more recently. I don't know comparatively if she's better now than she was then, but this has definitely followed her to Washington, and the reputation is still there.
So I've seen that since this initial reporting came out from the Huffington Post, other outlets have been sort of doing some research in this area as well, including BuzzFeed. I saw Stephen Colbert made a reference to your reporting. Some, though, at least in my experience on social media, have criticized the reporting that you and your colleagues did, either because they believe that this is just opposition research, sort of dirty laundry being aired, or some are saying that this is the sort of criticism that you wouldn't see of a male candidate, that somehow your reporting is helping to advance a sexist narrative against the senator. How do you respond to those criticisms?
So first, on the opposition research, that's not what this is. I mean, opposition research is when you look at a candidate's voting history, or you look at you look at what's publicly available. You look at yearbooks, for example, and see what's out there. This is something that we got by talking to people. We heard this from quite a few people, and so we decided to do more interviews and look into whether these claims were valid. This was just basic old-fashioned reporting. We've also been criticized because some of the people who talk to us are anonymous. But honestly, in my opinion, this is what anonymous sources are. These are people who have less power, who are trying to expose something that someone in power and who is more powerful is doing. And understandably, they're not comfortable with their identities being revealed. If they are, great. But the people we talked to weren't. And the other point on whether this is something that a man would get, I have reported for years on toxic work environments. Most of my reporting hasn't been about men. And I've also reported for years on the double standards that women face. We saw this with Hillary Clinton, for example. This is not that, in my opinion. If it were, I wouldn't have published it. But I think that it's important that we hold men and women who are creating toxic work environments to account, just because that there are many, many bad male bosses out there for years who didn't get written about. Doesn't mean we shouldn't write about the women now. We should write about men and women who are doing this. And I think that's really important.
So I guess I'm just curious, as we get geared up into this primary, I know that anytime we do, like, we're critiquing a lot of the candidates already. Anytime we say anything negative about any of these candidates, the people who have vested interest in their candidacy react poorly to it. Do those sorts of concerns at all play into your choice of topics, the pulling the trigger on actually publishing something? Are you at all concerned about that pushback?
No. Not at all. I mean, I expect that as well. And that we want to anticipate, I should clarify, we want to anticipate valid pushback. We went into this story very well knowing that people were going to be upset about it and wonder whether it was unfair, because women are often criticized for being tough bosses in a way that men weren't. So we looked at our story through that lens and made sure that we didn't have any biases and tried to write it in that way. People can argue about whether we were successful in that, but that was something we're aware of. So we do try to anticipate valid criticisms. But, look, we know that there are going to be a lot of liberals out there who may really like Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, whoever we write about, but those stories need to be told. The media needs to do a good job vetting the candidates on the left, just as they would on the right. And, the progressive movement is not going to be unified this time in the primary. There are just too many candidates out there.
I couldn't agree more. And so good luck entering into that process. I have a feeling it's going to be a bumpy ride at points. But Amanda Terkel of the Huffington Post, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.